My wife looked me dead in the eyes and said, "My daughter deserves a real father figure this Christmas. Not our daughter. My daughter." I stood there in our kitchen, holding the eggnog I'd been so excited to make, and she just kept going. She said if I didn't like the fact that she and my little girl were spending the holidays with her ex-husband, I could file for divorce right then. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even argue. I just nodded, accepted a transfer to Japan that I'd turned down 3 times for this family, and 7 days later, my phone rang with her screaming my name. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because what happened next didn't just break my heart. It rebuilt it from scratch.
My name is Matt, and for 12 years, I thought I had a beautiful life. I met Sarah when she was 6 months pregnant. The biological father, let's call him Derek, had walked out the minute he saw the positive test, blocked her number, moved to another state, didn't even show up for the ultrasound. I was 24, working 2 jobs, and I still remember the first time I held that little girl in the hospital. She was 3 hours old, wrinkled, tiny fists clenched like she was ready to fight the world. And I looked at her and thought, I will never leave you. I didn't just step up. I took a running leap. I paid for Sarah's physical therapy when she was born with a hip condition. I worked night shifts so I could take her to daycare during the day. I taught her to ride a bike. I held her when she had nightmares. I was there for every single first word, first step, first day of kindergarten. For 12 years, I was dad. And for most of those years, things were good. Not perfect, but good. Sarah and I had this bond that I thought was unbreakable. She used to run to the door when I came home from work. She'd yell, "Daddy's home," before I even had my keys out. But about 18 months ago, something shifted. It started small. Sarah stopped calling me Daddy. It became Matt, just my name, flat, like I was a neighbor. Then my wife started hiding her phone. She'd tilt the screen away when I walked by. She started going to late meetings that didn't show up on her work calendar. And then, 6 months ago, Derek came back. Apparently, he'd gotten sober, found God, wanted to make amends. And my wife, the woman who swore he was a ghost, decided that maybe Sarah deserved to know her real father. I didn't like it, but I didn't want to be the jealous husband. So I agreed to one supervised visit, then another, then unsupervised. And that's when the manipulation started. Sarah came home from one of those visits and told me Derek had bought her an iPad, the newest one. I couldn't afford that. I was still paying off her medical bills from the hip surgery. Then she started coming home with clothes, designer sneakers, a smartwatch. And every time my wife would say the same thing. He's just trying to make up for lost time. But here's what no one tells you about a bio dad who comes back with money. He doesn't have to do the hard stuff. He doesn't have to enforce bedtimes. He doesn't have to sit through parent-teacher conferences where they tell you your kid is struggling in math. He just shows up, drops cash, and looks like the hero. Meanwhile, I'm the one packing lunches at 5:30 a.m. I'm the one driving to hockey practice in the rain. I'm the one who stayed up all night when she had the flu. But slowly, my own daughter started looking at me like I was an inconvenience. One night, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. She said, "My mom's ex-husband is way cooler. He has a boat." Not my dad. My mom's ex-husband. I didn't confront her. I just closed the door and stood in the hallway for a full minute, staring at the wall. That was the first time I realized I was losing her. And my wife, she wasn't just allowing it. She was encouraging it. She started comparing us out loud. Derek would never make us wait for dinner. Derek has a nicer car. Derek is more emotionally available. I wish I was exaggerating. 2 weeks before Christmas, I came home early from work to surprise him with tickets to see the Nutcracker, something we did every year. And I walked into my own living room to find Derek sitting on my couch, his arm around my daughter, while my wife laughed at something he said. He looked at me, smiled, and said, "Hey, man, hope you don't mind." Sarah wanted me to help her decorate the tree. My daughter didn't even look up. She just kept scrolling on the iPad he bought her. I didn't cause a scene. I put the tickets in my pocket, went upstairs, and sat on the edge of the bed for 45 minutes. That night, I asked my wife if we could talk. I told her how I was feeling, how I was being pushed out of my own family. She rolled over and said, "You're being insecure. Sarah needs a father figure she can look up to." I said, "I am her father figure." And she laughed, actually laughed. You know what I mean, a real one. But the real betrayal didn't happen until Christmas Eve. I had taken the day off work. I'd wrapped every single present myself. I made homemade cinnamon rolls, Sarah's favorite. I had the fireplace going, Christmas music playing. I was literally in the middle of hanging her stocking when my wife walked into the kitchen with a suitcase. Not a small one, a large one. I said, "What's going on?" She didn't even pause. She said, "I already told you. Sarah and I are spending Christmas with Derek. His family is having a big dinner. It's important for her to bond with that side of her heritage." I said, "But we always spend Christmas together. That's our tradition." And that's when she looked at me with absolute coldness and said the words that are still burned into my brain. "My daughter deserves a real father figure this Christmas. You've been a great babysitter, Matt, but you're not her father. If you don't like it, file for divorce. Not our daughter. My daughter," and I was just the babysitter. 12 years. 12 years of midnight feedings, of wiping tears, of missing promotions, so I could be at school plays. And to her, I was a hired help. I looked past her into the living room. Sarah was standing there with her coat on. She wouldn't meet my eyes. She just stared at the floor and said, "Mom said we're going to have a real Christmas for once." I felt something inside me go very, very quiet. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I didn't try to change her mind. I just said, "Okay, what time does your flight leave?" My wife looked surprised, like she'd been gearing up for a fight, and I just handed her the win. She said, 4 o'clock. I nodded, walked to the closet, pulled out my own suitcase. She said, "Where are you going?" I said, "Japan." Now, here's the part one don't tell a lot of people, because it sounds cruel, but the truth is, I wasn't trying to get revenge. Not at first. I was just trying to survive. My company had been begging me to take a position in our Tokyo office for 3 years. It came with a 30% raise, a paid apartment, and a clear path to director. I'd said no every time because I didn't want to leave my family. But that morning, standing in my own kitchen while my wife packed to go play house with another man, I realized something devastating. I was the only one holding this family together, and they didn't even want me. So I called my boss. I said, "That transfer, is it still available?" He said yes. I said, "I'll take it. I can leave in a week." And then I got to work. I didn't scream. I didn't post anything on social media. I didn't even argue when my wife and daughter walked out the door that afternoon. I hugged Sarah. I told her I loved her. She gave me that stiff side hug that teenagers do when they're embarrassed. And then she got in the car and didn't look back. That night, alone in the house, I did something I had never done before. I opened our joint bank account, and I realized my wife had been slowly siphoning money for months. Small amounts. 50 here, 100 there. Probably for Derek. So I called a lawyer, a good one, and I did exactly what he told me to do. I withdrew exactly half of every joint account, not a penny more. I transferred the utilities into her name only. I canceled the credit cards we shared. I packed only what I came into the marriage with, and I left her half of everything else. But here's the part that matters. I also wrote a letter to Sarah. I didn't blame her mom. I didn't trash Derek. I just said, "I have always loved you, and I will always be your dad, even if you don't call me that anymore. My phone is always on, but I can't stay where I'm not wanted. I hope one day you understand." I left it on her pillow. Then I got on a plane. For the first 3 days in Japan, I didn't hear a word, not a text, not a voicemail, nothing. I assumed they were having the time of their lives. Derek's big house, his boat, his real father, Christmas. I found a small apartment in Shibuya. I learned how to say thank you in Japanese. I started my new job, and I told myself I was going to be okay. On day 4, my phone rang at 6 a.m. Tokyo time. That's 4 p.m. Christmas Day back home. It was my wife, and she wasn't calling to wish me a Merry Christmas. She was screaming, Matt, where are you? Why is the power off? Why is the credit card declining? Where's the money?" I stayed calm. I said, I took my half. The lawyer said it was legal. She started crying, actually sobbing. You can't do this. There are bills. The mortgage is due next week. I don't even know how to log into the account. I said, you should have thought about that before you told me I was a babysitter. And then I heard it, in the background, my daughter's voice. But she wasn't saying, Mom, what's wrong? She was crying, and she was saying something I didn't expect. She said, where's Matt? I want Matt. Not Dad, but Matt, still, even now. And my wife said, he's gone, sweetheart. He just left. And that's when I felt the last piece of my heart turn to stone. Because she didn't tell Sarah the truth. She didn't say, I pushed him away. She didn't say, I told him he wasn't a real father. She made it sound like I abandoned them. I almost flew home right then. Almost. But then my wife said something that changed everything. She said, Derek left too. I said, what? She said, he showed up drunk to Christmas dinner, crashed his car into the neighbor's fence. The police came. He had a warrant out for unpaid child support from another kid in another state. He's in jail, Matt. He's not coming back. The real father was a drunk with a warrant, and the babysitter was the only one who ever paid the bills. Now, this is the part where people ask me if I feel bad, and the honest answer is yes, but not for the reasons you think. I felt bad for Sarah, because she didn't ask for any of this. She was a kid who got manipulated by two adults who should have known better. But my wife, she made her choice, and she made it every single day for 18 months. She chose a fantasy over reality. She chose a man who ran away over the man who stayed. She chose a real father who turned out to be a fraud. And now she was sitting in a cold house with no power, no money, and a crying daughter, realizing that the man she threw away was the only thing holding her life together. She begged me to come back. She said she made a mistake. She said Sarah needed me. I told her I'd keep paying for Sarah's health insurance because I'm not a monster. But I told her I wouldn't be coming home. And then I hung up. And do you want to know the craziest part? The part one still can't believe? 2 days later, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. It was Sarah. She said, Derek is gone. Mom is crying all the time. The power is still off. I'm sorry I called you, Matt. Can you please come home? I stared at that text for 20 minutes. And then I wrote back, I'm not coming home, sweetheart, but I'm always your dad. And when you're ready to visit Japan, I'll buy the ticket. She sent me a voice note, just a few seconds long. She was crying, and she said, I love you, Dad. First time in over a year that... So here I am, 6 months later. I'm sitting in a small apartment in Tokyo. I have a new life, new friends, a promotion. I eat ramen for breakfast, and I still can't use chopsticks right. Sarah and I text every day. She's coming to visit next summer. Just her, not her mom. My wife is living in a small apartment near her sister. She's working 2 jobs. She asked me once if I'd ever consider reconciling. I told her no, not because I'm angry anymore, but because I finally realized something. You can't beg someone to love you, and you can't force someone to see your worth. For 12 years, I thought being needed was the same as being loved, but it's not. Being needed is about what you provide. Being loved is about who you are. My wife needed me, but she never really loved me, not the way I loved her. And as for Derek, last I heard, he's still in jail. His real family didn't post his bail. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Sometimes the loudest revenge isn't a fight. It's not a screaming match. It's not a court battle. Sometimes the loudest revenge is quietly walking away from a table where you're not valued and letting the people who push you out realize, too late, that you were the one holding everything up. My wife said my daughter needed a real father for Christmas. She was right. She just didn't realize she already had one. And now, he's 12 hours in an ocean away. Thanks for listening. Like and subscribe for more real-life stories. And remember, just because someone calls you family doesn't mean they treat you like one.